My husband told me he was leaving after I cleared his family's $80,000 debt. His mom smirked and said, "We never liked you anyway." But they had no clue what I had planned next. I sat there staring at the zeros on my bank statement, a hollow victory etched across my face. $80,000 gone just like that. But it wasn't the money that left me feeling empty inside. It was the words that followed, cutting deeper than any financial loss ever could. "We never liked you anyway." My mother-in-law's smirk burned into my memory, a cruel punctuation to the end of what I thought was a loving marriage. But as I watched my husband's retreating back, something inside me shifted. They thought this was the end. They had no idea. It was just the beginning. Hey, beautiful people. Your support means everything to me. Help me reach my next big milestone by hitting that subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and ensures you never miss an amazing video. Let's dive in. When I first met Ethan, it was like a scene straight out of a romantic comedy. I was juggling an armful of books at the university library, and he came to my rescue just as they were about to tumble to the floor. Our eyes met, and I swear I could hear the swelling of orchestra strings in the background. His warm brown eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and I was instantly smitten. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. It was a simple affair, a picnic in the park where we had our first date. When he got down on one knee, I didn't hesitate for a second. "Yes," I exclaimed, throwing my arms around him. I thought I knew what true happiness felt like in that moment. The wedding was small but beautiful. Ethan's family seemed welcoming enough, if a bit reserved. His mother, Margot, hugged me and whispered, "Welcome to the family, dear." I was over the moon, ready to start our life together. The first few years of our marriage were blissful. We were young, in love, and full of dreams. Ethan had just started his career in finance, and I was working as a teacher. We weren't rich by any means, but we were comfortable. We talked about buying a house, starting a family, all those things young couples dream about. But beneath the surface, financial pressures were building. Ethan's salary wasn't increasing as quickly as we'd hoped, and the cost of living in the city was skyrocketing. We started to argue more about money, about our future plans, but I believed we could weather any storm together. Then came the night that changed everything. Ethan came home late, his tie loosened, a haunted look in his eyes. I knew something was wrong before he even opened his mouth. "Lena," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something." My heart raced as he explained. His family, his parents, and his younger sister were in deep financial trouble. Years of poor investments and lavish spending had caught up with them. They were facing bankruptcy, possible legal troubles, and the loss of their home. "How much?" I asked, dreading the answer. $80,000, Ethan replied, his eyes pleading. "If we can help them clear this debt, they can avoid bankruptcy. They can start over." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. $80,000 was more than our combined annual salary. It was our future house, our future children's college fund, our safety net, all gone in an instant. But I loved Ethan, and despite their cool demeanor toward me, I thought of his family as my own. So I made a decision that would alter the course of our lives forever. "We'll do it," I said, taking Ethan's hand. "We'll help them." The next few months were a blur of financial maneuvering. We emptied our savings account, took out a second mortgage on our small apartment, and I even sold the jewelry my grandmother had left me. Every penny we could scrape together went toward clearing Ethan's family's debt. It was hard, harder than anything I'd ever done. I took on extra tutoring jobs in the evenings and on weekends. Ethan worked overtime, coming home late most nights. We barely saw each other. But I told myself it was worth it. We were saving his family, strengthening our bond, proving our love. The day we made the final payment, I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. It was over. We had done it. Ethan's family was saved from financial ruin, and now we could focus on rebuilding our own lives. I expected gratitude. Maybe a family dinner to celebrate our collective perseverance. Instead, I got silence. No thank you. No acknowledgement of the sacrifice we'd made. When I brought it up to Ethan, he brushed it off. "They're proud people, Lena," he said. It's hard for them to accept help, even from family. Give them time.
So I gave them time.
Weeks turned into months. Our own financial situation remained precarious, but I held on to hope. We had overcome this massive hurdle together. Surely our love could conquer anything. Then came the day that shattered my world. I was in the kitchen, trying to figure out how to stretch our meager groceries into another week of meals, when Ethan walked in. There was something different about him, a coldness in his eyes that I'd never seen before. "Lena," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "We need to talk." Those words. Those dreaded words that never precede anything good. "I'm leaving," he continued, as if he were discussing the weather. "I can't do this anymore. The financial stress, the responsibility, it's too much. I need a fresh start." I stood there, frozen, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. But we did this together," I stammered. "We sacrificed everything for your family. We can get through this." Ethan shook his head. "There is no we anymore, Lena.
I'm sorry.
But this is how it has to be." In a daze, I watched as he packed a bag. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. This couldn't be real. Not after everything we'd been through. Everything we'd sacrificed. How could he just walk away? As Ethan headed for the door, a thought struck me. "Wait," I said, my voice shaking. "What about your family? The debt we paid off?" He paused, his hand on the doorknob. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, guilt, regret, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "They'll be fine," he said flatly. "You should talk to them." And just like that, he was gone. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the closed door. Minutes? Hours? Time seemed to lose all meaning. Eventually, I found myself picking up the phone, dialing the number I knew by heart. Margot, my mother-in-law, answered on the third ring. "Hello." Her voice was cool, distant. "Margot," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "It's Lena." Ethan just left. He said I should talk to you about the debt we paid off." There was a pause, then a soft chuckle that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, Lena," Margot said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Did you really think that money would buy you a place in our family? We never liked you anyway." Ethan finally came to his senses. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering to the floor. Margot's words echoed in my head, each repetition like a knife twisting in my heart. "We never liked you anyway. We never liked you anyway. We never liked you anyway." As the full weight of the betrayal crashed over me, something inside me began to change. The hurt, the humiliation, the sheer injustice of it all. It all began to crystallize into something harder.
Colder.
They thought they had won. They thought they could use me, discard me, and walk away unscathed. But as I stood there in my empty apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life I thought I knew, a new emotion began to take root.
Rage.
Pure, unadulterated rage. And with that rage came a promise to myself. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They had no idea what I was capable of. But they were about to find out. As the rage coursed through my veins, I found myself pacing the apartment, my mind racing with a whirlwind of emotions. The betrayal, the humiliation, the sheer injustice of it all threatened to consume me, but beneath the chaos, a cold, calculating voice began to emerge. I stopped in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair disheveled, but there was a steely glint in her gaze that I had never seen before. This woman wasn't a victim. She was a survivor, and she was out for blood. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to think rationally. I needed to understand the full extent of what had happened. Only then could I plan my next move. I sat down at my small dining table and opened my laptop. With trembling fingers, I logged into our joint bank account. The balance stared back at me, a pitiful fraction of what it once was. I began to scroll through the transaction history, piecing together the financial puzzle of our demise. It had started small, a few thousand here, a few thousand there. Transfers to Ethan's personal account that he had explained away as investments or family emergencies. I had trusted him implicitly. Never questioned. Always supportive. What a fool I'd been. As the amounts grew larger, so did the frequency of the transfers. The final payment, a staggering sum that had emptied our savings account, had been made just 2 weeks ago. The timing was no coincidence. They had waited until the money was safely in their possession before discarding me like yesterday's trash. I leaned back in my chair, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. They had played me perfectly. The loving husband, the welcoming family. It had all been an act, an elaborate con to solve their financial woes at my expense. But their perfect plan had one fatal flaw. They had underestimated me. I spent the next few days in a frenzy of activity. I canceled our joint credit cards, changed the locks on the apartment, and consulted a lawyer about my options. The news wasn't good. Without proof of fraud, the money I had willingly given to Ethan's family was considered a gift in the eyes of the law. I had no legal recourse to reclaim it. The lawyer's words echoed in my head as I left his office. "I'm sorry, Miss Carter, but there's nothing we can do. My advice would be to cut your losses and move on."
Move on.
As if it were that simple. As if I could just forget the years of my life I had wasted. The dreams I had sacrificed. The future that had been stolen from me. Moving on wasn't an option. But moving forward? That I could do. I threw myself into work, picking up every extra shift and tutoring job I could find. By day, I was the perfect image of a woman trying to rebuild her life after a painful divorce. I smiled at my colleagues, assured my friends that I was doing fine, presented a brave face to the world. But at night, alone in the apartment that now felt too big and too empty, I plotted. I started with research. Hours upon hours hunched over my laptop, digging into every aspect of Ethan's family's lives. Their businesses. Their social circles. Their dirty little secrets. I left no stone unturned. It was during one of these late-night sessions that I made a startling discovery. A small news article, buried in the archives of a local paper, caught my eye. It detailed the mysterious circumstances surrounding the death of Ethan's uncle, Robert, 5 years ago. Robert had been wealthy, eccentric, estranged from the family for years. His death had been ruled an accident, but the article hinted at possible foul play. The pieces began to fall into place. The timing of Robert's death coincided with the beginning of the family's financial troubles. Had they somehow been involved? Had their desperate need for money driven them to the unthinkable? I saved the article, along with dozens of other potentially incriminating pieces of information I had uncovered. Slowly but surely, I was building a dossier on the family that had ruined my life. Every scrap of evidence, every whisper of scandal, it all went into my growing file of ammunition. But information alone wasn't enough. I needed a plan, a way to use this knowledge to bring them down. And for that, I needed help. I reached out to an old college friend, Alex, who now worked as a private investigator. Over coffee, I shared a sanitized version of my story, painting myself as a concerned ex-wife who feared her husband's family might be involved in illegal activities. Alex listened intently, his brow furrowed. "This is serious stuff, Lena," he said when I had finished. "If even half of what you suspect is true, we're talking about major fraud. Possibly even worse. Are you sure you want to get involved in this?" I met his gaze steadily. "I'm already involved, Alex. I just want the truth." He nodded slowly. "All right. I'll see what I can dig up. But Lena," he added, his voice softening, "be careful. These people have already shown they're capable of hurting you. Don't do anything rash." I thanked him for his concern, all the while knowing that rash didn't even begin to cover what I had in mind. Whatever it took. The first step was to establish a new identity. Lena Carter, the naive and trusting wife, was dead. In her place, I created Samantha Taylor, a savvy businesswoman with a keen eye for investment opportunities. I used a chunk of my dwindling savings to invest in a new wardrobe, a sleek new hairstyle, and subtle makeup techniques to alter my appearance, just enough. I practiced a new way of speaking, a new way of carrying myself. Samantha was confident. assertive. Everything that Lena had not been. With my new persona in place, I began to infiltrate the social circles that Ethan's family frequented, charity galas, business networking events, exclusive clubs. Anywhere they might be, Samantha Taylor was there too, always on the periphery, never drawing too much attention but always watching, listening, gathering more information. It was at one of these events that I had my first close encounter with Margot since that fateful phone call. I was at the bar, sipping a glass of champagne, when I heard her unmistakable laugh. Turning slightly, I saw her holding court with a group of society ladies, every inch the gracious matriarch. Our eyes met for a brief moment across the crowded room. I saw a flicker of confusion cross her face, quickly replaced by dismissal.
She didn't recognize me.
To her, I was just another face in the crowd, not worth a second glance. Little did she know, this face would soon become her worst nightmare. As I watched Margot turn back to her admirers, a cold smile played across my lips. The pieces were falling into place. Soon, very soon, I would be ready to strike. But first, I needed to secure my own financial future. The money I had lost might be gone, but I was determined to recoup my losses, and then some. I threw myself into learning about investing, spending hours studying market trends and financial reports. I started small, making cautious investments with what little money I had left. To my surprise, I had a knack for it. My investments began to grow, slowly but steadily. As my confidence grew, so did my ambition. I started taking calculated risks, leveraging my growing knowledge and the inside information I had gathered on various companies. Within months, I had not only recovered my initial investment, but was starting to see significant returns. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very skills I was using to rebuild my wealth were the same ones that Ethan and his family had exploited for their own gain. But unlike them, I wasn't driven by greed. Every dollar I earned was another step closer to my ultimate goal. 1 year to the day after Ethan had walked out of my life, I stood in my new apartment, looking out over the city's skyline. The woman reflected in the window was unrecognizable from the broken shell I had been 12 months ago. Samantha Taylor was a force to be reckoned with, a woman with the means and the will to bring down those who had wronged her. I raised my glass in a silent toast to my own reflection. "Happy anniversary," I murmured, a predatory smile playing across my lips. The time for preparation was over. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose that had been building for months. I dressed carefully, a tailored black suit that screamed power and confidence, the armor of Samantha Taylor. As I applied my makeup, I studied my reflection. The woman staring back at me was unrecognizable from the naive teacher who had given everything for love. Good. That woman was dead. My first stop was a small cafe across town, far from my usual haunts. I'd arranged to meet Alex there, away from prying eyes. He was already seated in a corner booth when I arrived, a manila envelope on the table in front of him. "You sure about this, Lena?" he asked as I slid into the seat across from him. Even after a year, he struggled to call me Samantha. Once you start down this road, there's no turning back. I met his concerned gaze with steely determination. "I'm sure, Alex. They took everything from me. It's time they learned the cost of their actions." He nodded slowly, sliding the envelope across the table. "Everything you asked for is in here: financial records, communication logs, witness statements about Robert's death. It's all circumstantial, but it's enough to start asking questions." I finished for him. "Thank you, Alex. I couldn't have done this without you." As I stood to leave, he caught my wrist. "Lena, Samantha, be careful. These people, they're dangerous. If they realize what you're doing," I gave him a small, cold smile. "Don't worry about me, Alex. I'm not the same woman they thought they could discard. I'm ready for whatever comes next." With the envelope tucked safely in my briefcase, I made my way to my next appointment. Over the past year, I'd cultivated a relationship with Janet Moore, an ambitious young journalist always on the lookout for her big break. We met in a busy coffee shop, the buzz of conversation providing cover for our meeting. "Miss Taylor," Janet greeted me eagerly. "You said you had a story for me?" I nodded, sliding a USB drive across the table. Everything's on here. Financial fraud, tax evasion, and possible involvement in a suspicious death. All tied to one of the city's most prominent families. Janet's eyes widened as she pocketed the drive. This is big. Are you sure about your sources? Absolutely, I assured her. Every piece of information has been verified. Of course, I'll need to remain anonymous. Of course, Janet agreed quickly. If this checks out, this could be the story of the year. I left Janet poring over the files, my heart racing with a mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. The first domino had been set in motion. Now I just had to wait for it to fall. The next part of my plan required a more personal touch. I had spent months ingratiating myself into the same social circles as Ethan's family, always careful to stay just on the periphery of their awareness. Tonight was a charity gala that I knew Margot never missed. The perfect stage for our first real confrontation. As I entered the opulent ballroom, I felt eyes turn my way. Samantha Taylor had become known in these circles, a savvy businesswoman with deep pockets and a generous spirit. Exactly the type of person Margot loved to cultivate for her pet projects. I made my way through the crowd, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. I could see Margot, holding court near the center of the room, surrounded by her usual coterie of confidants. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into her line of sight. It took a moment for recognition to flicker in her eyes. When it did, I saw a brief flash of shock, quickly masked by her usual haughty disdain. Well, she said, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention. Look who decided to crawl out of whatever hole she's been hiding in. Lena, isn't it? Ethan's little mistake. I felt the eyes of the group on me. Curiosity, mild disdain, amusement. They were expecting me to crumble, to run away in tears, like the weak woman they thought I was. Instead, I smiled, cold, sharp as a knife's edge. Margot, I replied, my voice steady and clear. How lovely to see you again. Although, I'm afraid you've got me confused with someone else. I'm Samantha Taylor. I extended my hand, noting with satisfaction how her eyes widened at the expensive watch on my wrist. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. Margot's hand trembled slightly as she shook mine, her eyes darting nervously around the group. I could almost see the gears turning in her head. Oh, of course, she stammered, her usual poise faltering. My mistake. Welcome, Ms. Taylor. Are you new to our little circle? Relatively, I replied smoothly. I've only recently moved my business interests to this area. I must say, I've heard so much about your family's ventures. Perhaps we could discuss them sometime. I'm always looking for new investment opportunities. Margot's face paled slightly. A flicker of fear passed behind her eyes.
Yes. Perhaps.
If you'll excuse me, I see someone I must speak with. As she hurried away, I felt the curious gazes of the group on me. I gave them an enigmatic smile before melting back into the crowd. The seed had been planted. Now I just had to watch it grow. Over the next few days, I kept a close eye on the news. Janet didn't disappoint. The story broke on a Tuesday morning, splashed across the front page of the city's most respected newspaper. Prominent family implicated in financial fraud and death investigation, the headline screamed. I watched from my apartment as the story spread like wildfire. By noon, it was on every news channel. By evening, federal investigators were publicly announcing a probe into the family's finances. My phone buzzed with a text from Alex. It's happening. Are you okay? I typed back a quick response. Better than okay. This is just the beginning. They were bound to fight back. Of course they would. They had money, connections, influence. But so did I now. And unlike them, I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I received an unexpected call. The number was unfamiliar, but I had a feeling I knew exactly who it was. Hello. I answered, keeping my voice neutral. You think you're clever, don't you? Ethan's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. You think you can just waltz back into our lives and destroy everything we've built? I allowed myself a small, cold smile. I'm sorry, who is this? Don't play games with me, Lena, he snarled. I know it was you behind that article. What do you want? Money? Is that it? You want your precious $80,000 back. Oh, Ethan, I said, my voice dripping with false sympathy. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about money. This is about justice. This is about consequences. You and your family thought you could use me and throw me away like garbage. You're about to learn how wrong you were. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Ethan spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost pleading. Lena, please. Whatever you think you're doing, it's not too late to stop.
We can talk about this.
We can make things right. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old Lena, the woman who had loved this man, who had believed in the goodness of people. But then I remembered the coldness in his eyes as he walked out, the cruelty in Margot's voice as she dismissed me. No, Ethan, I said firmly. It is too late. Far, far too late. You made your choice a year ago. Now it's time to face the consequences. I ended the call. My heart was pounding. There was no going back now. The gauntlet had been thrown down. The battle lines drawn. As I looked out over the city, a city that had once felt so big and overwhelming, but now seemed like my personal chessboard, I felt a surge of grim satisfaction. They thought they had seen the worst of me that day, a year ago, broken and betrayed in my empty apartment. They had no idea what I was truly capable of. The days following the publication of Janet's exposé were a whirlwind of activity. As I had anticipated, Ethan's family mobilized their considerable resources to combat the allegations. Their PR team worked overtime, issuing carefully crafted statements painting them as victims of a malicious smear campaign. They hired the best lawyers money could buy, threatening lawsuits against anyone who dared to repeat the slanderous lies about their business dealings. But I was ready for them. Every denial they made, every threat they issued, only served to keep the story alive, and with each passing day more evidence surfaced, corroborating the original claims and raising even more damning questions. I watched it all unfold from the shadows. Samantha Taylor remained a peripheral figure, a successful businesswoman with no apparent connection to the unfolding scandal. But behind the scenes, I was pulling the strings, feeding carefully curated information to key players in the media and law enforcement. It was during this time that I experienced what I can only describe as a dark epiphany. As I sat in my apartment one evening, watching yet another news report on the investigation into Ethan's family, I realized something had shifted deep within me. The pain of betrayal, the desire for justice, these had been my fuel for so long.
But now?
Now I felt something else. A cold, calculated satisfaction. One that went beyond revenge. I wasn't just righting a wrong anymore. I was reshaping the world around me, bending it to my will. The power I now wielded, the ability to build people up or tear them down with a few well-placed words or actions, was intoxicating. For a moment, that realization frightened me. Had I become the very thing I despised? Was I really any better than Ethan and his family, manipulating others for personal gain? But then I thought of Margot's smirk, of Ethan's cold goodbye, of the years of my life I had sacrificed for people who had never once valued me.
No, I was not like them.
They had acted out of greed and selfishness. I was delivering justice, not just for myself, but for the many others they had likely wronged over the years. With this new clarity, I redoubled my efforts. I reached out to my growing network of contacts, chasing down any additional dirt that could be used against the family. And then, during a seemingly routine call, I stumbled upon something unexpected. An old business associate of Ethan's father let slip a single, critical detail, an offshore account that hadn't been mentioned in any of the records I had uncovered so far. This account, he hinted, was where the real skeletons were buried. The shell companies.
The bribes.
The embezzled funds. I knew I had to get my hands on those records. But this time, it would take more than anonymous tips and digital breadcrumbs. This time I would have to get close. Physically close. The opportunity presented itself sooner than expected. A charity event was being held, not just attended by the family, but hosted in their own mansion. The perfect chance. The perfect setting. a transparent attempt to rehabilitate their tarnished image. As Samantha Taylor, I had received an invitation. It was time to step out of the shadows and into the lion's den. The night of the event, I dressed with particular care, a sleek black dress that hugged my curves, paired with subtle but expensive jewelry. I wanted to project an image of wealth and sophistication, someone who belonged in these rarefied circles. As I entered the mansion, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of nerves. This was the closest I had been to Ethan and his family since that fateful day a year ago. But I steeled myself, slipping into the persona of Samantha Taylor like a second skin. I mingled with the other guests, carefully making my way closer to where Ethan and Margot stood, greeting people with forced smiles. I could see the strain around their eyes, the tension in their postures. The ongoing investigation was clearly taking its toll. Finally, I found myself face to face with them. Ethan's eyes widened in recognition, a mix of emotions flashing across his face: shock, anger, and something that might have been regret. "Miss Taylor," Margot said, her voice tight. "How unexpected to see you here." I smiled, all warmth and charm. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. Your family's charitable work is legendary." The slight pause before the last word was deliberate, a subtle reminder of the dark cloud hanging over them. Ethan's jaw clenched, but he managed a stiff nod. "We appreciate your support, Miss Taylor. If you'll excuse us, we have other guests to greet." As they moved away, I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. Phase 1 complete. I was in the house. Now for Phase 2. Under the guise of looking for the restroom, I slipped away from the main party. The upper floors of the house were off-limits to guests, but that didn't deter me. I had come prepared. A small lock-picking kit was concealed in my clutch. Heart pounding, I made my way to Ethan's father's study. I knew from my research that this was where he kept his most sensitive documents. The lock on the door proved no challenge for my newfound skills. Once inside, I moved quickly, my eyes scanning for anything that might lead me to information about the offshore account. Time seemed to slow as I rifled through drawers and files, hyper-aware of every sound from the party below. Just as I was about to give up, I spotted a small safe hidden behind a painting. It was a long shot, but I had to try. To my surprise, the combination was easy to crack: the date of Ethan's parents' anniversary. Some things never change. Inside the safe, I found exactly what I was looking for: documents detailing the offshore account, along with records of shady transactions that painted a damning picture of the family's financial dealings. My hands shook slightly as I used my phone to photograph each page. I had just replaced everything and was about to leave when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Panic surged through me. I had stayed too long. Frantically, I looked around for a place to hide, finally ducking behind a heavy curtain just as the door opened. "I'm telling you, something's not right," I heard Ethan's voice say. "She shouldn't be here." "Calm down," his father replied. "She's just another guest. We can't afford to make a scene, not with everything else going on." I held my breath as they moved around the room, praying they wouldn't notice anything out of place. After what felt like an eternity, they left, still arguing in hushed tones. I waited a few minutes longer before slipping out of the study and making my way back to the party. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to appear calm and composed as I rejoined the guests. As I left the mansion later that night, I felt a surge of triumph. I had what I needed: the final piece of the puzzle that would bring Ethan's family crashing down. But as I drove home, a sobering thought occurred to me. In my quest for revenge, I had crossed lines I never thought I would. Breaking and entering. Theft of private documents. I was no longer just a wronged ex-wife seeking justice. I had become something else entirely. The realization should have troubled me more than it did. Instead, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. I had adapted, evolved, into what I needed to be to see this through. As I walked into my apartment, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back at me was a stranger. Harder, colder, more determined than ever. "No turning back now," I whispered to my reflection. The die was cast. Whatever happened next, I was committed to seeing this through to the bitter end. As I stood there staring at my reflection, I knew that the next phase of my plan needed to begin immediately. The information I had obtained from Ethan's father's safe was a ticking time bomb, and I needed to use it strategically. The following morning I woke up early, my mind already racing with plans. I knew that simply releasing the information about the offshore account would cause a splash, but it wouldn't be enough to bring down the entire family. I needed to craft a narrative, to set the stage in a way that would make the fall of Ethan's family not just a possibility, but an inevitability. My first step was to reach out to Janet, the journalist who had broken the initial story. Over a secure line, I hinted at new developments, stoking her curiosity without revealing too much. "Keep your eyes open," I told her. "Things are about to get very interesting." Next, I turned my attention to social media. Over the past year, I had cultivated a network of influential accounts across various platforms. Some were real people I had carefully befriended as Samantha Taylor. Others were personas I had created myself, clever fakes with convincing backstories. Now it was time to put this network to use. I began by subtly seeding doubt about the family's denials of wrongdoing, a tweet here, a Facebook post there, all carefully worded to seem like innocent speculation rather than a coordinated attack. I watched with satisfaction as these posts began to gain traction, picked up and amplified by others who had their own reasons to distrust the wealthy and powerful. As this online whisper campaign grew, I turned my attention to more direct action. I had spent months documenting every questionable deal, every hint of impropriety I could find related to Ethan's family. Now I began anonymously sending this information to relevant authorities, tax officials, financial regulators, even local law enforcement. I was careful to space out these revelations, making it seem like multiple sources were coming forward independently. Each new piece of information built on the last, creating a damning picture of corruption and deceit that spanned generations. All the while, I maintained my public persona as Samantha Taylor. I attended charity events, made strategic investments, and continued to build my reputation as a savvy businesswoman. To the outside world, I was completely disconnected from the growing scandal surrounding Ethan's family. But behind the scenes, I was orchestrating every move. I watched with a mix of satisfaction and cold detachment as the pressure on the family began to mount. News reports became more frequent and more critical. Whispers of criminal investigations grew louder. Former associates began to distance themselves, afraid of being caught in the fallout. Through my network of contacts, I heard that Ethan and his family were starting to feel the strain. Their once solid facade was beginning to crack. Margot had been overheard having a heated argument with her husband at a restaurant, their voices carrying despite their attempts at discretion. Ethan had started drinking heavily, showing up to business meetings unkempt and irritable. It was during this time that I received an unexpected visit from Alex. My old friend and private investigator showed up at my apartment one evening, his face grave. "Sarah," he said, reverting to my old name despite my protests. "I need to know, how far are you planning to take this?" I invited him in, poured us both a glass of wine before responding. "As far as necessary," I said simply. "They need to pay for what they've done." Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I get that. I do. But Sarah, Samantha, whatever you want to call yourself now, this isn't just about exposing some financial misdeeds anymore. The stuff you've been digging up, the way you're releasing it, you're systematically destroying these people's lives." I felt a flicker of annoyance at his words. "And what about my life?" I countered. "They destroyed it without a second thought. Why should I show them any mercy?" "Because if you don't," Alex said quietly, "you might lose yourself in the process. I've seen it happen before. People get so focused on revenge that they become something they never meant to be." His words hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. I thought about the woman I had seen in the mirror the night before, the stranger with cold eyes and a colder heart. For a moment, I felt a pang of doubt. Was I going too far? But then I remembered Margot's smirk. Ethan's casual cruelty as he walked out on me. The doubt hardened into resolve. "I appreciate your concern, Alex," I said, my voice steady. "But I know exactly what I'm doing. and I'm prepared to face the consequences. Alex looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I hope you know what you're doing, he said as he stood to leave. Just be careful. These people, they're not going to go down without a fight. After he left, I sat alone in my apartment, turning his words over in my mind. Alex was right about one thing. Ethan's family wouldn't give up easily. They had too much to lose. I needed to be prepared for their counterattack. Over the next few weeks, I redoubled my efforts. I reached out to former employees of the family's businesses, offering anonymity in exchange for information. Many were hesitant at first, but as the public tide turned against their former employers, more and more began to come forward. Each new revelation was like a puzzle piece falling into place, painting a damning picture of decades of corruption, exploitation, and deceit. The offshore account I had discovered was just the tip of the iceberg. There were shell companies, fraudulent charities, even hints of connections to organized crime. And as I compiled this information, I began to see a pattern emerge. As a luxury they could only afford when times were good, this realization gave me an idea. If I could put enough financial pressure on the family, force them into a corner, they might make a desperate move, one that would expose their true nature to the world once and for all. With this in mind, I began to adjust my strategy. Instead of just exposing past misdeeds, I started to target their current income streams. Through my business connections, I quietly advised investors to pull out of the family's ventures. I used my social media network to start rumors about the stability of their companies. The effect was slow at first, but as the weeks went by, it began to snowball. Stock prices for companies associated with the family began to drop. Longtime business partners started to distance themselves. The once mighty financial empire that Ethan's family had built began to show signs of crumbling. Throughout all of this, I maintained my cover as Samantha Taylor. I even reached out to Ethan directly, offering my sympathies for the difficulties his family was facing. The conversation was tense, filled with unspoken accusations and barely concealed hostility. I don't know what game you're playing, Ethan said at one point, his voice low and angry, but if you think you can take us down, you're sadly mistaken. We've weathered worse storms than this. I just smiled, my voice honey-sweet with false concern. I'm sure you have, Ethan. I'm just offering my support as a friend. After all, we all go through difficult times, don't we? The look in his eyes, as we ended the call, told me everything I needed to know. He suspected my involvement, but he couldn't prove anything. More importantly, he was scared. The unshakable confidence that had once defined him was gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered look. As I hung up the phone, I felt a surge of cold satisfaction. The stage was set. The players were in position. Now it was time for the final act to begin. I walked to my window, looking out over the city that had once seemed so vast and impersonal. Now it felt like my chessboard, with Ethan's family as the pieces I was methodically removing. Check, I whispered to myself, a small, cold smile playing on my lips. Your move. As I stood by the window, savoring the moment of anticipation, I knew that the time had come to launch my first major offensive. The groundwork had been laid, the tension had been building, and now it was time to watch the first domino fall. The next morning, I put the final touches on a comprehensive dossier I had compiled. It contained irrefutable evidence of the family's financial fraud, including details of the offshore account I had discovered in Ethan's father's safe. But more than that, it included a meticulously researched timeline that linked their fraudulent activities to several high-profile business failures in the city, companies that had gone bankrupt, leaving hundreds jobless, all because of the Thompsons' greed. I sent this dossier to Janet, the journalist who had broken the initial story. I knew she would verify every detail before publishing, which would only lend more credibility to the exposé. Within hours, I received a call from her. Her voice was filled with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. This is incredible, she breathed. If even half of this checks out, it's not just fraud we're talking about. It's a systematic dismantling of the city's economy for personal gain. How did you get all this? I smiled to myself, pleased by her reaction. I have my sources, I replied cryptically. The important thing is, can you run with it? Can I? This is the story of a lifetime. But are you sure about this? Once this goes public, there's no going back. The Thompsons will be ruined. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hesitation. Was I really ready to destroy the family so completely? But then I remembered the cold dismissal in Ethan's eyes, the cruel smirk on Margot's face. My resolve hardened. I'm sure, I said firmly. The public deserves to know the truth. The story broke the next day, splashed across the front page of every major newspaper and leading every news broadcast. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Social media exploded with outrage. Longtime business associates publicly distanced themselves from the family, and within hours, there were calls for a formal investigation. I watched it all unfold from the safety of my apartment, a glass of champagne in hand. It was surreal to see the fruits of my labor playing out on such a grand scale. The family's carefully constructed image was crumbling before my eyes, and I felt a surge of vindication. But I knew this was just the beginning. The Thompsons wouldn't go down without a fight, and I had to be prepared for their counterattack. It came sooner than I expected. That evening, as I was preparing for bed, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I had a feeling I knew who it was. Hello? Sarah. Ethan's voice came through, tight, with barely controlled rage. Or should I say, Samantha. I have to hand it to you. I didn't think you had it in you. I kept my voice cool and composed. I'm sorry, who is this? Don't play dumb, he snarled. We know you're behind this. I don't know how you got that information. Would you like to see a part 2? Then make sure to subscribe and comment part 2 below.